Now the last paper before lunch is going to be Environmentalism in the Vedic Context by Atul Sathe, who has been working in the environmentalism area. He is also a journalist who has worked for many press media organizations, and he has been with environmental movements, and he has been an environmental journalist also. Uh, and he prefers to be in the ecology and environmentalism field for his career also. Atul Sathe.
Uh, Thank you, Dr. Paturi. And I also thank the entire team at Indic Academy for providing me this opportunity to talk on two topics which are the closest to my heart. One is, as you rightly said, about caring for the environment, as well as my deep faith in our Vedic culture and all the traditions. And I have always been observing, both while working in the environment sector as well as a journalist, as a writer, that there is a very close overlap between sustainable living, conservation of environment, and our sustainable Vedic culture. And it has always been my attempt to sort of bridge these two disciplines together. I am neither a Sanskrit scholar nor am I an environmental researcher, but I am more of an educator, writer, journalist, and communicator. Uh, and with that background, I would share my slides. Just give me a moment. So as you can see in the heading, I would be talking about Indian traditions and conservation. And that picture there is of a sacred grove in the Ratnagiri district of Maharashtra, as is the case in most of the sacred groves. And you can see there is a small shrine there, and a dense patch of vegetation, the forest, which you can see in the background. So we would be revisiting ancient wisdom for contemporary solutions, because it is always said that any philosophy, any knowledge is of use when it can be put to use in the contemporary problems and issues. So that's what we'll try to explore here. So India's philosophy, as we all know, it is the only ancient one to survive till date in largely the original form. We all know that there were nature worshipping, eco-friendly cultures all across the world, many of them inspired by the Vedic culture, many of them homegrown in those particular geographies. But sadly, very few of them survive till date, and our Indian Vedic culture is one of them. And our Vedic culture, as we all know, it addresses almost all walks of life in the most holistic manner. But here, within the framework of this presentation, we would be discussing the environmental part of it, the environmental sustainability part of it, and that would be across various disciplines or across various walks of life. We would try to touch upon that. To begin with, the very first fact, as we observe, is all living and non-living entities in nature are considered to be manifestations of the supreme being in our Hindu Vedic culture. So people may describe it as cosmic consciousness, cosmic energy, or Parameshwar. But the very essence is that we are spiritually connected to every living and non-living form. So once we feel we are connected, any lay person would definitely think twice before destroying something to which we are so innately connected. And then we talk about dharma. In today's times, the word is used in the most inappropriate manner. But as we know, dharma, the Sanskrit word, dharayati iti dharma, so that which sustains. So actually today we talk about sustainable development, but the very word dharma in Vedic context, it continuously keeps talking about sustainability. And as we know, dharma talks about ethics, duties, love for all beings, obeying the laws of the land, the natural laws, and the eternal cosmic principles. So in fact, dharma encompasses every possible aspect of behavior. And development should be within that dharma framework. And we observe that it is said that Sathe, which is the relative truth, if we add the dharmic or eternal principles to that, it is converted into Ruta, which is the universal reality. So it is said that if we explore the Ruta and try to implement that, we would once again be in sync with nature as other creatures are there. They are programmed for that. Continuing with the Indian philosophy, interestingly, the photo here is from a place called Mathiran in Maharashtra, which is a part of the famous Sahyadri or Western Ghats, which is a world biodiversity hotspot. So Indic philosophy, as we have seen also in some of the previous presentations, that it is not anthropocentric and it is not compartmentalized, and it includes the entire universe in the whole way of thinking itself. And we refer to Mother Earth as Bhumata and Vasudha and provider of all wealth. And the Sanskrit words Dohan and Shoshan exactly explain how we are supposed to live on this earth. We are not supposed to conquer or exploit the earth, but use it in the most sustainable way, in the Dohan kind of way. And the law of karma, it is mentioned that whatever we give comes back to us. So if we do harm to other creatures, it is going to come back to us. And I find that it's very comparable to Newton's third law of motion. And we know that the Newton's laws are also, very much in line with Rishi Kanad's principles. Indian philosophy has been encouraging the principle of least violence. So either many people are vegetarians, even those who are non-vegetarians are non-vegetarian in a very limited way. They eat non-veg only on a few particular days of the week, etc. And finally, as far as the philosophy is concerned, it talks about balance in all actions, which brings lasting happiness, not just some temporary happiness. And it has always been advocated that material pursuit should go hand in hand with spiritual progress. And if we take a quick cursory look down the ages, right from the Vedic era, we see that the earliest scriptures, the Vedas, they have been highlighting the importance of forest ecology and harmonious living. And not just that, there is vivid description of biodiversity of those times in the Vedic scriptures. For instance, the Rig Veda, which is considered to be the oldest among the four Vedas, it has many descriptions of the lion, but not of the tiger. And that indicates its antiquity, because it is said that the lion has been an older inhabitant of the Indian subcontinent, particularly northern India, and the tiger has been a recent entrant. And more details of these very interesting details can be found on the blog of Srimati Rupa Bhati. We have read that the hermitages of sages were invariably in forested areas, and wild animals are known to have lived in those times very peacefully in close proximity of those hermitages. Ramayana, as we know, it talks about sustainable kingdoms, and there are beautiful descriptions in Valmiki Ramayana about the observations of the forest by Bhagwan Ram and Sita, and their loving relation with the flora and fauna. Coming to Mahabharata, we all know that Mahabharata is more known for the victory of good over evil, and Bhagavad Gita. Interestingly, towards the end in Shanti Parva, it has a lot of details about conservation of natural resources and sustainable living. And going forward, even Chanakya, Buddha, Mahavir, Ashoka, they have all emphasized on the protection of resources. And even ancient poets like Kalidasa, they have described the natural bounties of India, and that too very scientifically. For instance, in his writings, he talks about the bar-headed goose, which migrates northwards and back southwards in particular times of the year. So when he writes in his writings that, okay, if this is the thing that is happening, the goose is migrating, that means this is going to be the season now. So it's based on empirical observation. And all the devotional sects in medieval India also talk about love and compassion for all living beings. And if we look at the conservation from the macro picture, all the Panchamahabhutas, the 5 basic building blocks of life, they are worshipped and thus naturally protected against over-exploitation. Because as we saw earlier, when something is worshipped, people tend to protect it without any laws, particularly. There is concept of Bhuta Shuddhi in our culture, where we are taught how to live in harmony with all the 5 elements. all the mountain forests and the river sources. These mountain forests are the sources of rivers. They are the catchment areas. They prevent soil erosion, prevent floods, and their conservation is advocated, as in the case of the Aranyani Sukta. If you observe even in India, in the Western Ghats, Sahyadri, whether it is Mahabaleshwar, whether it is Tala Kaveri or any other places, those are river sources and they are culturally protected. Even the courses of rivers and lakes have always been considered to be divine. So then that naturally discourages any kind of pollution or reclamation of the water body. So it has been an holistic science explained by way of symbolism so that even the lay person understands it. Another interesting feature going forward, various animals have been considered as sacred, and naturally once they are associated with deities, there is scientific reason behind that, spiritual reason behind that, and then naturally they are conserved. For instance, Devi Durga, her vehicle is either the lion or the tiger. If we see in western and northern parts of India, invariably the lion is depicted. In the eastern parts of India, tiger is depicted, depending on which is the predominant apex species in the food chain. So if the tiger and the lion are protected, the entire forest ecosystem is protected. Same with elephant, who is associated with Bhagwan Ganesh, and the elephant plays a very vital role in the forest ecosystem in maintaining a balance between the dense forest areas and the grassland areas, and churning between the two kinds of sub-ecosystems. We all know that cattle, cow and bullock are considered sacred, and cow is considered mother. The cattle have a role in every human endeavor almost. And even big and small animals have been depicted with reverence, as in the case of Bhagwan Parshvanath. And on the Ashoka pillar, we have the lion, bullock, and the horse. Langur, which is supposed to be associated with Bhagwan Hanuman, plays a very vital role in seed dispersal and forest regeneration. Cobra associated with Shiva, again, major role in controlling the rodent population. Turtle plays a vital role in keeping the water bodies clean. Similarly, sacred birds, we all know peacock, our national bird. It has a major role in the forest ecosystem in way of controlling the pests. The swan, as in the case of the goose, it gives indicators about the condition of the climate and weather based on their migration patterns. Eagle associated with Bhagwan Vishnu. Eagle is like the tiger in the sky, the apex predator. And the owl, vehicle of Devi Lakshmi, again a major role in controlling rodents so that there is ample crop, and a crop is a very important manifestation of Lakshmi. Vulture, depicted as Jatayu and Sampati in Ramayana, they keep the countryside clean, very important role in the ecosystem. The crow, considered sacred because of association with the ancestors, again keeping the countryside clean. Koel, associated with various vrats and practices, and so that those trees which support birds like koel are, that's how protected, so that the koel can be viewed during those particular rituals. The Saras crane, considered symbol of love and fidelity, it has a major role in wetland ecology. Similarly, we have a lot of sacred plants, as we can see here, the banyan and the sacred fig, that is the people, huge sprawling trees, which have a very, very major role in carbon sequestration, and more importantly, providing habitat and food for a myriad species of birds and animals. Cluster fig, also known as Udumbar in Sanskrit, again maintaining the cycle of the water table, and it also indicates the water table traditionally. Neem, as we all know, major role in medicine and pest control. Medicinal properties of wood, apple, tamarind, amla, all considered sacred. Mango, mentioned in Bhavishyotter Puran, a very important source of nutrition. And Bale and Sita Ashok. Devdar in the alpine Himalayan areas, it's considered sacred, prevents soil erosion. And holy basil, as we all know, no more description required on that about its utility. And we have a culture of forest conservation. So many species have been studied and protected as per the Ayurveda and Vrikshayurveda. Today we talk about taxonomy, scientific classification of species. The ancient Indians have also done really good taxonomy work in Ayurveda and Vrikshayurveda. One example which was also given by Shefali ji earlier about the 21 plant species which are used in Ganpati worship. So the very reason data is that once you need all those 21 species every Ganesh also, you are going to invariably protect those plants in the vicinity of your home so that you can use them at the time of the festival. And many forest dwellers are known to conserve trees as per their gotra. And it is known that the old Rajasthani villages used to have 4 forests maintained in 4 directions, one for regular use, one for a nominal drought, second in case of a very severe drought, and the fourth one was never supposed to be touched. And there is a concept of worshipping plant deities, as in the case of Mahapurush, which are typically the ficus species in southern Konkan. In southern Konkan, mangroves, which are the coastal forests, they are also worshipped, as well as the Vruksha Devata in case of northern Konkan. Sacred groves, as we all know, are patches of forest which are traditionally conserved across India. And the patron deities or energies of that particular locality which ensure well-being are worshipped. And the sacred groves which are not touched by people traditionally, they are major ecosystems, biodiversity hotspots, and river catchment areas, as well as gene pools. Even the concept of evolution has been looked at in a very holistic way in the Indian culture, in the form of the Dashavatars, and it talks about not just physical but spiritual evolution. So the first 4 manifestations of the Bhagwan, Matsya Kurma, Varaha, and Narasimha in the Satya Yuga, where everybody was adhering to the natural laws, talks about the evolution from the marine species to the human birth. And then in the Treta Yuga, as we know, Vaman, Parshuram, and Ram, in an era of developing human intellect, along with spiritual powers and still surviving purity, and then Krishna and Buddha in the transition zone of Dwapar and Kali Yuga, on the eve of, on the threshold of chaos and degradation, and then finally Kalki. So somewhere there is physical as well as spiritual evolution depicted here. The 4 Purusharthas, this is very interesting from an individual as well as the society point of view, because everybody keeps talking about sustainability, and the Indian tradition has an inbuilt sustainability because it talks about working in a very holistic way and not first doing destruction and then taking remedial measures. So everybody is supposed to first adhere to the dharmic principles and then earn their livelihood within that framework, satisfy all the desires within that framework, and also seek the ultimate liberation gradually as they go through this process. The concept of Rajyog meditation, we all know in Ashtanga Yoga, there are the 8 limbs described. I observed that the first 2 limbs, the yam, which talks about external interaction, it talks about ahimsa. So ahimsa involves obviously not harming animals and plants as well. It talks about asteya, non-stealing, so non-robbing of natural resources, aparigraha, non-holding, so only use as much that is required, don't be an in an excessively consumerist mindset, and then the niyama for code of conduct for internal cleansing. So santosha, if we are content with whatever we are getting through hard work in an ethical way, we won't be destroying natural resources beyond a point. And the tapas or the swashista, so discipline. So we talk about the 3 R's: reduce, reuse, recycle. So this kind of tapasya is actually hinting at that. And Swadhyaya, self-study analysis. So if we are into a contemplative mode in between, so we can actually come up with sustainability solutions. We talked about Ramayana. Quickly, we will take a look at the 3 towns or 3 regions which behaved in 3 different ways. The philosophy of Ayodhya was living on intellect backed by intuition. By intuition, we mean that connect with the divine. Kishkinda was completely living on instinct. It was a forest dwelling community, and Lanka was living only on intellect alone. The lifestyle of Ayodhya was rural plus urban combination with a judicious usage of resources. Kishkinda obviously was forest dwelling, so completely nature based. Lanka was rural plus urban, plus it was tending towards wasteful usage of resources. So naturally, the environment impact in the Ayodhya kingdom was there was sustainable utilization of resources. Kishkinda obviously sustainable because totally in sync with habitats. But there are also instances and descriptions in Ramayana which talk about the destruction of natural resources in the Lanka kingdom. and the same is then depicted in the state of society in those particular regions. Quickly coming to Chanakya's Arthashastra, everybody keeps talking about what is the best economic model possible, and whether it is consumerism, communism, capitalism, or whatever. But I think going forward, the root is spiritual economics. And as we all know, Chanakya says, Sukhasya moolam dharma, dharmasya moolam artha, arthasya moolam rajya, rajyasya moolam indriya jayam. So seeking happiness and through enterprise, ethical enterprise, and if we are to succeed in the enterprise in a sustainable way, we have to control our senses. So there is inbuilt sustainability in that. It obviously advocates equitable distribution of wealth, sustainable growth through conscience and adherence to ethics, and judicious resource management. It is interesting to note that there are sections in Arthashastra which classify the forest into different usage areas. Its conservation, wildlife protection is advocated, management of land, as well as sustainable agriculture. And thus we see that even in agriculture, there are sustainable practices. Lakshmi is considered in the form of Dhanya Lakshmi, the crops and
Atulji,
seeds. Yeah.
Atulji,
Yes, sir.
are we close to the conclusion? We
Yeah,
have to
this
move to
is
lunch and have a post-lunch session.
yeah, this is the third last slide. So 3 more minutes.
Please
Yeah,
conclude as soon as possible.
sure. So even cropping patterns were in tune with the soil and the climate, and natural fertilizers obviously, and trees were always encouraged on the farm burns for natural pest control through the medium of birds, and designated pasture lands were always used so that the cattle don't destroy the forest. The Mandi Boy tradition ensured healthy offspring for cattle, and shepherd community was always sustainable as far as the grassland ecosystem is concerned, and subsistence hunting and subsistence farming were always practiced. And naturally, all the celebrations have been green celebrations. Either they are harvest festivals, as in case of Dasara or Sankranti, or they are celebrating and respecting the cattle, or even the Indian New Year, known by different names in different states, is celebration of the advent of spring. Celebrations like Naroli Purnima actually encourage sustainable fishing, and Nagapanchami protection of snakes, and Vanabhojan actually going out into the forest once in a while to enjoy meals in company of nature. So naturally, the Indian lifestyles have always been sustainable. Roads, temples, etc., constructed through local materials, as you can see in the picture, and architecture enabled use of natural light and air, and local renewable fuel options, locally grown cuisine, non-polluting transport, and renewable resources used for all the objects used in the household. And the human habitation was alongside nature always. And so reduce, reuse, recycle, it is inbuilt in Indians. And many of these options can actually be reformed in a modern avatar by combination of appropriate technology. So we come to the last slide. So with all this background in all this urbanization and development kind of era, we still have respect for simplicity and knowledge in most average Indian homes. These things are respected. There is emphasis on a peaceful way of life. Indians are known as peaceful people. Preference for locally made fresh food is still observed to a large extent. We still have our practices of judicious consumption and coexistence. We keep morsels for animals. We try to plant trees even in crowded urban spaces, and depiction of flora fauna in culture. And this we see getting reflected in modern forms like CSR, the concept of food miles, deep ecology, etc. But we have with us for thousands of years. So going forward, the last two lines. So we have to make lifestyle choices that really bring lasting happiness. We can take a leaf out of our Vedic knowledge, and even at the policy level, holistic economic and technological growth within the framework of dharma or sustainable spiritual concepts is what I wanted to put forth. Thank you so much, and thank you for giving me an opportunity to be in this august audience. Thank you so much, sir. Any questions?
Namaste, Atulji. Wonderful. It was a wonderful survey of actually true to a journalist. You have covered actual factual data in the paper.
One question about the mention of LGM, last glacial maximum. Should I answer that question
Yeah,
quickly?
please.
Yeah. Srimati Richa Badola ji asks what you mentioned LGM in reference to Rupa Bhatti's blog with respect to lions. What does that mean? Actually, LGM, as it is known, the last glacial maximum, as in that time period around say 20,000 years ago, when the effect of the last glaciation, the greatest extent of that effect was still visible, and a lot of depiction of flora and fauna in the Rigveda actually hints to an era which coincides with the last glacial maximum. And that was the time when the Indian subcontinent was not as thickly forested as it is today, as per Rupa Bhatti's blog. So the lions, which are more of a grassland animal, were more prevalent. And then as the climate became warmer, tigers actually sort of settled more into the subcontinent, driving the lions further westward. So that's the connection with last glacial maximum. Thank you, everybody.
Great.